Welcome back once again to another episode of Hard Knocks, where we talk about all those things that they don't teach you at school unless you are lucky enough to have a mentor like John or I there to help you out. And that's kind of what we're here for. We're here to teach you those lessons because I have fallen down and I have scraped my knees more than enough times. And you've probably done it about 20 times more than I have.
I definitely have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that's what we're here to help you.
In fact, that's why I registered hardknocks.com 20 years ago.
Oh, really?
Because I knew that I would need this someday.
Oh, see, the story comes out. I didn't know. So all the way back 20 years ago.
Oh, at least 20 years ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I also registered blunders.com. That was another whole thing, another rabbit trail, but that was because I really felt like I wanted to catalog all of the blunders that I see in advertising.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other subject. But anyway, that's what Hard Knocks. I thought this is great. It's the School of Hard Knocks.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so today, what we want to spend our time talking about is some little tips and tricks we learned along the way for how you do networking, how you go on even when you're on something like a sales call. If you're a marketing person and you're at a trade show, how you go and handle those situations a little bit better. And we've got a few things that really no one ever teaches you. And a couple of these are things that since moving out here to Denver, I even just learned like several months ago.
Right.
And they have since completely changed every conversations that I have. Mm-hmm. And that is, in fact, the first hard knock that we're going to talk about here, which is so commonly when you go up and you're trying to have a discussion with someone. How often do you find yourself turn to the person and say, great, tell me what you do?
What do you do?
What you do.
Right.
It's what everyone talks about. Here's the problem is that, one, everyone asks that question.
Right.
It's super annoying. You have to answer it the same way every single time. And you generally don't learn anything about the person. And if you remember what we've talked about from so many hard knocks up to this, because this is episode 7, I believe.
Right.
We've had multiple hard knocks out there that are basically all about you have to be legitimately curious about that person sitting on the other side of the table from you.
Right.
Because all sales is about, and everything marketing is about, is establishing that relationship back and forth.
Right.
And the more that person starts to feel like, oh, you're one of me, you get it, or you're interested, all those barriers go down and you start to get into what is the actual problem that they have. What is something you can truly help with? And they'll just tell you. I mean, how often do you go talk to your friends and you just literally just talk about stuff?
Right.
And you'd never tell that to the person at your job or the marketer or the sales guy who's talking to you that could actually help you fix the problem. Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah.
And so what I learned, and this came from my good friend out here, Todd Riley. Todd, God bless you for this question. It is amazing. And it is whenever you meet someone new, ask the question, where do you get your energy from? Not what you do. Some people like to ask different questions like, who are you? That's a little bit too close.
Yeah, that's a little too...
Like I love that question, and it's really good. It's just so often people see that as the exact same thing as what do you do? Right? Because you establish yourself. But the question of, hey, when you go to work all the time, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. In fact, we could role play really quick.
Sure.
So you all can see the beauty of this question. And because I've been talking so much, I'm going to go ask the question to you.
Go right ahead.
So imagine that John is sitting down at a super generic place. Let's just say like a Starbucks, okay?
Sure.
I drove up there. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, beautiful sunny day here in Parker, Colorado. And I'm just turning over to him and say, hey, John, so I'd love to hear more about what you do. I mean, I looked up a little bit about your background on LinkedIn. By the way, make sure you do that ahead of time of a meeting. That's another hard knock for some other time.
Right.
But I'd really love to hear what gives you the energy to keep doing what you've been doing the entire time. Is it like the marketing and everything that you're doing, or is it something outside of work? Like, what do you really love doing?
Yeah. And I think that's a great question because first off, it takes people off balance. I think most of us are all cued, ready to tell our elevator pitch, especially in business. Like it's a business setting. I'm here to either pitch you or answer you or something like that. And when I ask something that's a little bit off center, it really takes me in a different direction.
Yeah. So how would you have answered that question if we're doing a role play here?
Right. So I'll continue. So the role play I would say is, that's a great question. I get my energy from making connections with people.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Right. So it's just that it's the way I'm wired. I really, I feel like if I meet people and for me, the things that give me energy are the very things that make people really nervous, other people nervous.
Oh,
So, for
interesting.
instance, if like I go to trade shows or I go to events or even cocktail parties and I get energy, I love being there. I love meeting people, making connections, understanding a little bit about them, and then kind of my brain is working a little bit of tic tac toe almost of connecting like, oh, that's who you are. I wonder if I could connect you with somebody else that I know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that little bit of logic solving is something that my brain gets a little dopamine from. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know exactly what it is, but there's something very real. I'll give you an example. I met a man a couple of nights ago and he was talking to me about what he does,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he's a plumber.
Oh, interesting.
And so I immediately thought of my friend Sarah, who just 2 days ago was looking for a plumber,
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so my brain was already firing like, oh, I should get your contact information because I can introduce you to Sarah because
And you
she's
love
looking
doing
for
that
someone.
stuff.
And I love doing that stuff. It
Yeah,
gives me energy. So that's how
yeah.
I would answer that question.
Now, see what I do, because John is such a businessman, he's not really given me the details down below that I'm really looking for. Because that's something that you might get energy from.
Right.
But it's not really as much in the realm of like getting more personal or getting to really know you. So
Right.
I just asked a question again saying, oh, that's really awesome. Outside of making connections with people, where else do you get energy? And
Yeah.
I would keep going deeper,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have to. People like, if someone asks me that question, I'll just go straight into saying, hey, I love playing role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons with people. I
Right.
love storytelling and figuring out like
Mm-hmm.
what's the cadence someone has to use in a voice and really studying that, and how do I make a connection somewhere so that it's really meaningful and impactful, and I go down those tirades.
Right.
And for someone like my friend Todd, who's really good at this, you will have a discussion with this person, not talking about business, for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's
If you
really
guys,
awesome.
if you got a 30-minute meeting,
That's so really cool.
I want to challenge all of you. If you have a 30-minute meeting scheduled with someone to talk about business or see if they might be a connection, see what happens if you spend 10 to 20 minutes just learning about them
Mm-hmm.
and what they do.
Totally agree.
Because it's really amazing what ends up happening. We were introduced to another marketer out here, and clear as day, she was extremely expecting it to just be another regular meeting, ready to just talk about marketing for who knows, like an incredibly long time, like 30 minutes long.
Yes.
Generally, how it goes, and she should have literally, that is what she should have been expecting. However, I started that conversation and I said, well, tell me a little bit more about where you find your energy from. How are you able to get up each day and keep meeting with these clients? Like, what do you do? When you're done with work, what do you do? And she starts telling the story about how, wow, well, I love being a beekeeper. I'm like, a beekeeper?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
that
this
was
is
a
a
great
story.
story.
Yeah,
Right,
tell
right,
me more about
right.
that. And we dig deep in that.
Yeah.
And how she's introducing her third queen bee because the other two have died off. We all of a sudden start getting a little bit of a tangent, learning that she has a dog washing business.
Right.
Drive around, do that grooming remote.
Franchise.
Yeah. And then it gets into franchising. And here's the thing, and this is why this question is so powerful as well, besides just disarming someone. So you can really get to the meat and potatoes. If my goal, sure, I love to do business with this person, but if we're trying to network and I want them to make really good connections to me and I want to make good connections to them, I want to introduce the people to John that he's going to mesh with.
Right.
And by him only saying, yeah, I like making connections, I like marketing, that tells me nothing about the people that he's going to vibe with at all, period. And so I'm going to end up making connections to this guy that would be completely meaningless. He's not going to really respect when I reach out to him saying, hey, you got to go meet this person.
Right.
So it makes it hard for me to provide value. And after he learns more about me, because I'm going to say the same thing, and say, hey, and this is where I get energy. That's the other half of your conversation. Make sure to share yourself. He's going to be able to make amazing introductions to you.
Right.
And this literally happened when I was talking with Todd. He made introductions to people that are a lot more nerdy. And one of the guys I met, I probably never would have gotten introduced to because he's not necessarily in marketing, but he's a huge Tolkien nerd, just like me. And we talked about that for half an hour straight. And then we ended it getting back on business because you both know why you're there in the first place.
Right.
And you kind of start networking a little bit.
Yep.
And the people you get introduced to are just of immensely higher quality,
Mm-hmm.
way higher quality.
Yeah. And in keeping with Hard Knocks and the things that we talked about, I really would challenge you to think outside of business because these questions work great. They're great if you're going to a new neighborhood like us, right?
Yeah.
Whole new city, state. They work great if you're trying to meet someone, a significant other, you're going to a cocktail party, going to a friend's house. It might be a party of some sort. These are really wonderful, as you said, disarming questions. It reminds me of some sales training that I did very early on with a man by the name of Howard Schurz. And Howard and I just, you meet people and you're like, yeah, we're going to be friends forever. And Howard was a really terrific trainer. And he talked about the importance of skimming along the surface. And so he gave us that mental image of skimming rocks on a pond, right? And how it just kind of skips along 4 or 5 different skips. He said, when you're making an introduction and your first conversations with people, that's where you want to skim along the surface. And this is a question that provides that. And I think it also prevents you from going down these rabbit holes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the rabbit hole of what do you do? All of a sudden, oh, well, I'm a marketer, I'm an engineer. What's the fun project you're working on? It's probably not a fun project.
Yeah, it turns out not a lot of people are blessed to enjoy the work that they're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
They're good at it, but they get
Right.
their energy elsewhere.
Yeah. In fact, sidebar, fun fact is that some really amazing companies that I've worked for in the past, when you onboard, the first question they ask is, what are your hobbies?
Yeah.
And that's what this was an ad agency most recently did it. And that's what they use, that data, to match you up with their clients.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I mean, that's basically...
But not your background. Normally, you'd think, oh, well, you came out of the tech sector. You were a programmer. I'm going to have you work with the SaaS companies. But oh, no. They connect you with your hobbies.
Yeah.
And I don't know why more companies don't do it, but they just don't do it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it goes outside of the box, and a lot of people are used to going to work, and I'm not supposed to do anything else but work.
Right.
But we
Very
know, I mean, we know from psychological research and also all the other hard knocks we've talked about that it's a lot easier to go and provide value and when you have energy and you're really looking forward to doing something,
Right.
or you enjoy your workplace, I mean, you do better work. And so it's really worthwhile to try to break through that awkward mold of, I don't really want to talk about it.
Correct.
And people will say that.
Yeah.
And that's totally okay. I mean, you can ask it every now and then when you have that meeting with that person. But the last thing that's really beautiful about this particular question is, remember last episode we talked about a little bit, we'll probably have a whole episode on it at some point, about black swans and how there's usually many other people behind the person you're talking to that are really making the decisions.
Right.
Asking questions like these help you get ins to go and find out things like that, because you're getting away from what they do. You can find out almost everything someone does by looking at their LinkedIn. And if they don't have a LinkedIn, they probably they could have a newsletter or something. And if they really don't, then sure, maybe you might be legitimately interested. That's totally fine. But you find out all those things, and you'll probably happen upon some of their real decision-making factors for why they're doing something in the first place, especially if you're selling something. Like finding out that I do a lot of recording and I have multiple YouTube channels. And you were talking about last week about, well, why do you need internet?
Right.
And you're doing that interview. And if he had asked a question like this and learned, oh, yeah, I do that stuff, smart person putting one and one together, oh, he needs bandwidth. He needs to be able to move around very easily. The significance of Wi-Fi versus wired. You put the whole picture together, and now you're like, this is David, rather than this is David.
Yeah. And the thing I like about that, just as a last point, is the way our memories work is the more connections that you make with that individual, the more likely you're going to remember them.
Oh, yeah.
So if it's just this one little silo of business and technology or something versus the whole person experience.
Oh,
right.
Absolutely.
For example, now, again, role playing, you probably would have followed up on my question with something like, well, what's the setting in which you feel that energy.
Yeah, where do you love to do it?
And I would probably say at an airport, because I love traveling.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other subject, which has nothing to do with work, but it has a lot to do with me as an individual.
Absolutely. And thank you to the people doing my lawn outside right now. Man, we just can't find a time recently where there's not an airplane flying right on over.
Right.
There's not someone who's trying to show off how big their car really isn't by putting one of those fake mufflers on.
Yeah, right. Or the motorcycle guy that just has to rev his engine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But coming back around here, so the next thing we're going to talk about, because this entire episode, like we were saying, is all about networking. How do you really make really good connections? How do you introduce people to the best types? And so the next thing we're going to talk about is, now that you know the types of questions or the main question that you want to ask that person, well, now it's really important, as it turns out, that you have to think. This is the next hard knock. You have to think about who you're meeting and dress to match the part.
Yes.
And this comes from, and I'll throw over to you to kind of talk through it, but this comes from both of a very good friend of ours, Brant Dolan.
Right.
And it just tell me a little bit, like, especially that farmer story. Like, if you're driving out to a farmer, like, what are the things that you're going to be thinking about if you're trying to make a business pitch to someone who works on a farm?
Yeah. So you want to dress appropriately so you are disarming that individual.
Yep.
So if I'm going to go see a farmer showing up in a 3-piece suit, probably not a great idea. Dressing that part, maybe jeans, could be work boots, could be a uniform of some sort, could be a jacket that has your logo from the company, something that looks like you are a professional in that field.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And there was a book written a number of years ago called Dress for Success. And the interesting thing about it is it was really aimed at working in an office, which is a fraction of the number of people who work. But the application was about dressing for success of that particular setting of wherever it is.
Okay, yeah.
So we've seen this in our client work. So the industrial and the commercial space has people that wear a particular, let's call it not a uniform, but they do wear particular shirts. They may wear a coat. So if they're actually on a line or doing work, they have safety equipment and they have safety clothing. At least it's a bright orange or a bright green, right?
Yeah.
It's part of that. If I'm going out to do an estimate, I'm not doing that in a suit. I'm doing that in some uniform-ish looking thing, which I've got a professional looking coat. And if I'm calling on doctors or if I'm playing that role, I may be wearing a lab coat.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
So those are some things just to keep in mind. It's not always dressing like impeccably. So when you look in the mirror, you're thinking, oh, I look good today. It's more about how is that going to make the other person feel? And is it going to be disarming? And in other words, you don't want them to look at you and say, well, I can't afford that person.
Yeah, well,
that would be really bad.
I think the way I always thought about it is that, just kind of touch back up on the story that Brant told me.
Right.
When he was first describing this, is he said, all right, David, I want you to very quickly imagine that you are going to sell some type of service to someone out on a farm. What are you going to wear? And I was like, I guess my polo shirt and maybe some nice pants. And he said, wrong. That's not what you're going to wear. You're going to drive up there. I want you to rent a car. The car you're going to rent is going to be a big truck. That's how you're going to drive in. I want you to be wearing probably a polo. That's probably fine, especially if you got one that might have like a little stain on the bottom from like doing some yard work, would be great. The pants you wear, I want worn jeans. And these shoes, I want them to be work shoes. And I want them to be polished at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be literally like the shoes that you might wear when you're mowing. And you're going to drive out there, and that's how you're going to meet that person.
Right.
And I was like, huh. And loving psychology as I am, I'm putting the pieces together. I'm like, this is literally like we were talking about a couple episodes ago about the power of mirroring. And if you start using the words that someone uses, the power of that, because it makes them feel like you're part of their kin, which is exceptionally important. Well, dressing is the exact same way. I want you to look like my people. If you look like the odd goose, the ugly duckling, even if you might look the best out of everyone, not necessarily a good thing. So if let's say you're meeting me, right, and you dress and you look wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
that's great. But if you're wearing a shirt because you took some time on my background, you're like, oh, okay, this guy is a huge nerd. He loves D&D. He loves all this type of stuff. And you're thinking, okay, maybe I'll wear some nicer pants, and then I'll wear a shirt that might have something related to that topic or some type of nerdy culture, and I'll put like a little cover up over the top of it so that you still look kind of nice, but you have that little bit here. Man, easy topic to talk with you about all of a sudden. It
Yes.
is so amazing. And I'm going to connect with you way more because I
Yeah.
took that time to think about it.
Right.
Now, if I'm going to go and, for example, well-known SEO out there, friend of mine, Michael King, for
Mhm.
example,
Right.
okay, dresses impeccably.
Oh, he's at the other end.
Oh, he's at the other end.
Yeah.
I know he wouldn't mind. And I mean, super friendly guy. Oh, the most friendly guy you'll ever meet.
Right.
However, if I really want to like meet him on his level, then great. I'm probably not going to wear what I have on here right now, even though he wouldn't care. Right?
Right.
What I might wear is, sure, you know what? Why don't I try out wearing a blazer and some really nice pants and some of the nice shoes that I really love that are
Right.
kind of blue.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite color is blue. It happens that it's his. I wouldn't go to the point where you're like copying them. That's kind of weird.
That could be weird.
That would be really weird. Not
Right.
saying to do that.
Yeah.
But I kind of show up like that. And now I'm like, okay, cool. No, like I'm kind of matching a little bit. I'm making that conversation go. I'm taking that little bit of extra time. He's a little bit of a nerd himself. So yeah, maybe underneath my blazer, maybe I would have one of my D&D related shirts underneath.
Right.
Just kind of that mix match.
Mhm.
And so you don't have to go like to that extent, but just thinking in your head that when I'm meeting someone, it also matters how I'm doing it.
Right.
And how I drive up and the way that I'm walking in and the things that I have on me and all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The more you can feel like you're part of that culture, the better. So long as it's not you literally, this is the key point. You don't want to fake yourself.
Right.
You always want to be yourself. So there is that line that you have to find out about how much can I change about how I'm dressing or walking, that I'm still me. And you want that individuality, but
Right.
you don't but you at the same time want to realize, okay, well, I could like wear this instead that I wear maybe once every couple weeks.
Sure.
Because I think they'd really appreciate that. And it's that type of thinking.
Yeah. I think a lot of this also hinges on the brand image that you want to project.
Very much so.
Right. So I think of a couple of companies that I've seen in the past. One is a firm up in Rockford, Illinois called Barber Coleman. And going back many, many years, they instituted a policy that if you're going to be on the floor in the factory, you are wearing one of their jumpsuits. So all the guests, even the president of the company, when you got a tour, you had this little, very cool little jumpsuit. And all of the workers had jumpsuits, and they were all kind of styled differently based on what their role was, right? So as a guest, you put on this jumpsuit. So it was a whole suit. You put your legs in, zipped up. And when you zipped up, it created a little bit of a bow tie for you. Okay. Very, you would say cute, right?
Yeah, of course.
But all of us were wearing that. And you got the sense of how important it was for them to project an image to not only their guests, but also all of their workers, that these are special people that are coming through. And they're not wearing suit and ties anymore, right? They're one of us, and they're wearing our jumpsuits.
Mhm.
And I thought that was a really, really cool thing. And kind of similar to that is not only what you wear when you're going out to meet people and you're projecting your own image, but I also think about when you are providing workers to a business and your workers are in their facility, the importance of you dressing perhaps a little bit differently. So we have some people that we know when they show up, it's all jeans and t-shirts and so forth. They might have a safety vest on. But imagine if they bumped that game up and it was part of the brand image that they provided, that it was a uniform that they wore, right? And that when they were there, the client would say, wow, I know you guys are here because of the way you dress. You show up and you look uniform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is all buttoned up. And I bet that is going to project the image that is how your work is going to be performed as well. It all follows through.
Yep.
And just one last story. Intel was very much like that. We had a once a month executive would come through all of our facilities, and he was known or she was known as Mr. Clean.
Mr. Clean.
Right. And they came through, and you had to have your desk clean all the time. So you couldn't have random papers, books out, like it all had to be buttoned up. You couldn't have boxes sitting on the floor. And I said, well, what difference does it make? This is my little cubicle, right? Why
Yeah.
can't I decorate it
Yeah,
that
of
way?
course, yeah.
And the answer is we have so many people coming through for visits. Our customers are coming through, and we want to project this image of cleanliness because that's how we build our products. And true to form, everything we did was very uniform. How we dressed, how we the clothes that we wore to even our sales calls, everything was impeccable, and it was all top notch. It really came
Yep.
through, and that was our brand image.
Yeah. It's super important.
Yeah.
So we talked about when you meet someone, what question you might want to ask. We
Right.
talked about thinking a little outside the box in terms of how what you're wearing, your candor can really affect that as well. But now, and this was one that you really want to talk about, which was just some little jujitsu moves
Right.
of how using a prop, because sometimes you're going to like a trade show,
Right.
and you didn't have an explicit meeting set up,
Mhm.
and your goal is, and now I got to go and meet those people. I got to go find a way to start a conversation, to do an icebreaker. And
Right.
there were a couple things that you've learned over the years, some
Mhm.
really cool quick tips. We'll kind of go through one after the other
Right.
that are really cool and interesting ways to use a prop you literally have to make it a little bit less awkward to go break the ice.
Yeah. So here's a simple one. The simple one is, you go to an event and they give you the little sticky things to write your name on, and it's some sloppy magic marker, right? And then you slap it on, and it generally doesn't stick very well, and it falls off somewhere halfway through the meeting.
Yep.
And then you're always wondering, do I put it on the left side or do I put it on the right side? And the answer is you always put it on what side?
I don't know.
You always want to put it on your right side,
Oh,
which is
okay.
just the opposite of what people think. And the reason why is when you shake hands, then you will be they will see your name tag when you shake hands. If it's over here on your left side, which is what most people think
you're
it should
turning
go,
away.
you're turning away and they won't see your name.
Oh,
So
that's
it's
fascinating.
just the opposite, because like the shirt I have on here has a pocket. And so naturally people think, oh, that's where my name tag goes. But it doesn't. It goes on the right side. So anyway, little tip. So rather than that, I have friends that have made custom name tags. You can go online and make these things, right? Very simple to do these days. And they're hard plastic. It has a little magnet on the back so it doesn't destroy your clothes. You don't have a pin through it. And you don't have adhesive that's going to stick to whatever you're wearing, which inevitably is not a good thing. And it really makes you stand out.
Yep.
And so now I have a little place for my company. It could be my name. It could
Yeah.
be that. I can make up a whole bunch of these, right?
Yep.
And it is just another level up that when you meet someone, they're like, oh, are you here with such and such? Oh, I am, but I brought my own name tag. Well, now I start a whole conversation just about name tags,
Yep.
right? People get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another one right there that's a huge pet peeve for me.
Yeah.
How often, I bet a lot of people watching this now and in the future yet to come, you blur out your Zoom background.
Yes.
You love doing it because maybe it's just a little bit too messy, or you're like, no, I want them to look at me. Stop! What are you doing? Your background that you have on a call is an opportunity to tell literally everyone about you without telling them about you.
Right.
It is a great way to help them eventually ask you the question of where do you get your energy from? That's where you want to get to. Why do you think, by the way, yes, this is set dressing. All the books we have in front of us, it's to make the image look good. I love doing that stuff. But these are all books that we've read. These are all books that represent the types of people that John and I are. When you're looking at his side over here, like from the book he's written, Marketing Playbook, to the books that I've written, like the Web Almanac, different books over here, Sherlock Holmes, and we change them up all the time. That's also to subconsciously, by the way, all of you listeners, there is a chance that when you are listening to something or you're watching it and you see one of these books, you'll think, oh, he's a fan of that. And what did I just do? You just connected with me on a personal level. Mm-hmm. If I'm on a Zoom call, if your room is messy, well, I mean, shame on you anyways. Come on, just level up your game, take 30 minutes, clean the place up. if you get on a lot of them, invest, I don't know, $100, go to IKEA, get a really simple like calyx shelf, like the little boxes, and just put some knickknacks that you really love in there.
Right.
It doesn't have to be exceptionally pretty. It can be pictures of family. It can be something you did in the
Especially.
past.
Mhm.
And it's a really great way for someone to, during small talk, bring up something you actually care about and are truly interested in. And I'll give a really fun example of this. So on my YouTube channel for D&D called Modular DM, in my background on my bookshelves, I constantly add things to it that I've talked about in all my previous videos.
Got it.
And so when I get on a business call with someone, I have had happen a couple times where someone's like, "Why do you have a spinning wheel on your shelf?" And I'm like, "I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you a little bit about that." And I go in a tirade for like 30 minutes. Tirade probably not the good use of time, but I'm like, "Yeah, that's because I do this. I love storytelling, and a lot of people tend to do it just by sharing cards or rolling dice. But there's a lot of other mediums you can do that with. And sometimes, if you're trying to tell a different story, how great is it to spin a wheel with everyone at the table? Yes, it's you making the decision for something that's going to happen to you, but it's just at a different moment. It's a different
Totally agree.
feeling. And all of a sudden, what did they learn? Oh, this guy really cares about user and customer experience. He likes thinking outside the box. He gets into psychology, and I didn't have to do anything.
Right.
I just had to be willing to share a part of myself.
Yes.
So that's a tip for you there. Stop blurring out your background. It's a waste of time. You're wasting a humongous amount of possibilities that could come up, and you might end up getting to know someone better than you previously would.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Right. And fake backgrounds are in that same category as well.
Oh, yeah. I really don't like them.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. I mean, if you really want a great background, like spend a weekend and just make your background.
Yeah.
And if you really can't because you're exceptionally mobile, sure, that's fine. Still don't blur it out. People will love. There's been countless times that John's been traveling around, hopping on his laptop, and he's in a cafe. And so often our clients were like, "Oh, John, where are you today?"
Exactly. Where's Waldo today?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And you'd think, "Oh, that's a sidetrack from the conversation." But no, I'm having a much more personal conversation with this person. I don't want, I mean, going through all this, the main highlight so far is you don't, when you're meeting someone, whether it be strictly for business or you're pitching a product or you're trying to get investors or just trying to meet someone new, you don't want them to see you as a 1D person like, "Oh, he's just here to pitch this. Oh, he's just here to know about this." No, you want them to know about you. That's what people buy.
Exactly.
That's what people want, is they
Right.
want you, especially in this world of AI now. You got to start doing that, be authentic.
Authentic. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So I think that moves us to our fourth hard knock here. I'm kind of going back and forth all the way through here, right?
Yeah.
And this is, now you've met someone, you know the questions you're asking. And so what do you end with? How do you end the conversation?
I'll let you take this because this came from a meeting that we had with Perry Marshall.
Yes, we did.
And it's been probably 2 years ago. And it was just a catch-up meeting, and I invited David to come with because Perry's known David since he was 13 years old. And so we were all catching up on what's going on with one another. And then Perry was talking about a new project that he was working on. And so I'll set the stage there for you, and I'll let you take it from there, how he introduced this concept.
Yeah. So we were talking back and forth, and I was just mentioning some of my friends I've made along the way, and a couple of names came up. And he said, "David, I'd really like for you to make an introduction to me, that person." And I was like, "Sure, more than happy to." And I asked a very good question, which was, "What made you ask?" And he came back and he said, "So, David, I'm going to share with you some really interesting insights I've learned over the years." And this knowledge wasn't originated by Perry. I cannot remember the name of the man who it did come from, but Perry, at least to me and to John, popularized it. And it is, always ask the question at the end of a meeting, who's someone I ought to know but don't? And the concept behind it is not just to get another meeting with someone else to like keep networking forever. That's not the purpose. The purpose, as he was saying, is the most valuable connections you make, the most interesting ones, the ones that like lead and you're like, "Wow, that's the person that I'm going to spend like hours with every single week," or it might be an amazing opportunity. Those tend to come from people that know just enough about you and are on the very outer edge of your network. So they're not your close friends. They're not your close friends. They're the very outer fringe part of your network.
Mm-hmm.
and then they introduce you to someone even further outside.
Right.
Those end up being the most powerful connections you can make.
Yeah.
And the main reason for that, science aside, is that one person that you just reached out slightly outside your network for, huge possibilities because they are not in your network.
Right.
You have just rapidly expanded your network to be like, it was here. And normally when you ask people to introduce or you do something like that, it's just more people that are kind of here. But if it's that person on the fringe, all of a sudden your network just grew and it will continue growing more and more and more and more and more. And the power of that question has been exceptionally helpful for me. I mean, that's how I ended up getting my house. I met one of my buddies at church and I asked him, hey, or actually no, it was the pastor at our church, and I got a meeting with him and I said, who's someone I ought to know? And he introduced me to one of my buddies, Josiah, out here. And then I asked that question to him. And then he introduced me to a good friend of mine out here who was my loan officer.
Right.
Wonderful guy. Ended up helping me pull off some different tricks to get my house.
Mm-hmm.
And all that happened just because, you keep on making and you pushing outside your network, which is really good. And I'm not looking at that point for it to be someone specifically for my job. It tends to be that way very often.
Right.
But if there's one key thing to making this work, note how at the beginning I said, it has to be from someone on the outer edge of your network that knows enough about you. How are they going to get to know enough about you? Well, by asking these questions, by going to that meeting and making sure that they know, you're kind of one of us. Or by asking questions like, who are you? And where, not who are you, sorry. Don't ask that question. Ask, where do you get your energy from?
Right.
And learning about that and then sharing yourself as well. You gain more people on the outer edge of your framework or your network that know what you do and who you are and what you really love spending your time doing, and they'll make those connections.
Right.
And you start to, it's really, really, it's hard for me to articulate how interesting it is, the types of connections you make with people, because a lot of times they end up being connections that you otherwise never would have been introduced to.
Yeah. I think if you're listening with any kind of an ear here, you're hearing how we have gamified networking without even trying. It's something that we truly enjoy doing. And I think about how these networks that we've put together, me coming to Denver, staying in an Airbnb, getting to know the host, of which was a realtor. I introduced that realtor to David, and she was your realtor for this home.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
You talked about talking to the pastor, Mark,
Yep.
who got you to Josiah,
Yep.
Josiah to Seth.
Yep.
Then you introduced me to Seth.
Yep.
Seth is going to be my loan officer when I buy a home.
Yep.
But I've gotten to know Seth, and I know what his personal journey is. And I just introduced him to a friend who's going through a very similar journey that he went through, and they're talking next week.
Yeah.
Those things give us energy. And I would challenge everyone here to, if you don't enjoy networking and it gives you sort of the heebie-jeebies of meeting people.
Yeah, most people.
I would say gamify it. Make it a game to where you're almost playing, as I said earlier, tic-tac-toe. You're filling in some dots. You're making connections. And all of a sudden, it gets to be fun. That's where, again, I talked about that at the very beginning. I get energy from this. You get energy from it, even though I would say you're a little more of an introvert than I am.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I get energy from it. I get energy meeting someone who's interested in talking with me.
Okay.
That for sure.
Right.
Yeah, that can be a lot of fun. I'm not like you who just sitting down with someone is, no, that drains me.
Right.
That drains me to no end. Yeah.
Yeah. But you love closing the loop, just like what I was talking about.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a game.
Yeah. It is very, very interesting. And I think for people that know that they need to start networking, but are a little bit worried and thinking about how on earth I would do it, asking some of these questions, it turns it into more of, I just kind of want to learn a little bit about you and I want to share what I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
And you do have to learn how to stop being awkward and thinking that people aren't interested, because it's not true. People are totally interested. They literally took your meeting. They're sitting on the other side of the table from them. You took time to learn about them. They will give you 5 minutes to learn about you. Right. And I've never had a meeting ever where someone is basically like, hey, shut up, I need to get back to business. The only time that's kind of happened is when I literally only had 10 minutes to talk with someone, which is a little bit more understandable.
Right.
But other than that, it just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yep.
But the last thing, a short little tidbit, is there's a lot of people out there talking about the very end of the meeting. What you leave them with? Well, usually a business card.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people out there, including myself, that have made the move to a digital business card.
Yes, me too.
And there's a kind of this last hard knock is more of a buyer beware of some of the hard knocks you're going to learn with digital business cards. And this is not meant to say don't buy them, but more of a just so you know, these are reasons why John and I are thinking about going back to physical business cards.
Yeah, I'm beyond thinking about it. I'm already planning to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can explain what is actually going
No,
on.
no.
Well, I love the idea of a digital business card because it gives you everyone's link tree, basically. It's all there for you, right? But I started recognizing that probably only half the people that I've met, and I don't know why, but they don't have their NFC turned on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
So they have no ability to actually tap or get close to the digital business card and that it actually does something.
Yeah, which is like the magic. So with these cards, you
Yeah.
tap it to the back of the phone, it pops up. And
Yeah.
if you don't have that, now you're like trying to scan the QR code on the back.
And that's where, right. And then you're like, well, now I have to get their information, and does it actually get into my contacts, and what am I going to do with it? And it just got a little horsey for me. Whereas when I went to a trade show recently, of course, I'm collecting other people's business cards, and they're still on my desk, and I have little notes written on them because that's how I take notes. After I meet someone or during a meeting, I'll jot a couple of notes down on the back of their card, and then that's some bit of a follow-up or a tickler file for me to call them. Now, should they go into my CRM? Yes, they have. But there's nothing like having something physical to remind you to do something.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love those regular business cards.
Yeah, I think for me, there are a couple things. One, at least for Blink, BLINQ, that's what I use. I can't speak to the other ones out there, so perhaps this problem isn't as pronounced on other platforms. But I do know when you go through and you use that app, you have to still handhold the person who is in your contact information. Because the way that app works right now, or that website, is when I click, add contact, it opens up a screen that looks just like you have added the contact successfully to your phone, and you close it down. Great. And I thought that was wonderful. Then I started wondering, why are people not like reaching out to me more? Found out it's a double confirm. It opens up, you have to have someone scroll all the way down to their bottom and then click add to contact. It doesn't happen immediately. And it's really weird and frustrating, and adds this little bit of like weird energy. Having to do that at like the conference I gave a keynote at. You have 10 people who want your information. And I'm like, this will save a lot of time. It doesn't save a lot of time. And while I still like it, because you can quickly, I mean, one of the pros about what people like is you can swap out your profile immediately. You can change different words. I'm going over to this different conference. I can then have it say something different, more specific to that, which is great. But I have also had the moments where someone just takes down like my phone number, or they didn't really connect it all that well. And all of a sudden now I'm getting a text from someone like a month later saying, hey, I don't know who this is.
Right.
But can you give me your name? I know we met at this event, etc. And that just doesn't happen with a business card.
Right.
So there are a lot of different reasons why I'm also a very big digital guy. I'm thinking about going back.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, at least for me, it goes back to a little bit of the branding.
I was just going to say that.
There is if you're in a digital savvy place, a digital business card can just be better because it can give off that feeling of, okay, these guys are with it. However, at least for me and John, the perspective that I want to give off almost always is like, this is like really cool that you get to have this card. Almost that slight Japanese businessman culture, which is when you hand someone a card, like you bow down, you give the card, it's this whole thing.
Yes.
And the information you can put on it, the personalization you can make. I mean, going back to what's that famous movie all about when the three men are comparing like the three different business cards and like, oh yeah, this is like bone white, and it's
Yes,
there's
right.
a culture to it.
Yes.
And it's something that I would say if you're considering moving to a digital business card, I'm not saying don't. but I'm saying that you should think a little bit about, are you okay with a lot of the shortcomings that they do have, that a lot of these companies just do not talk about? Because if you're trying to hand out a bunch of business cards to, like, say 10 people, it's a lot easier to just give 10 business cards, you're done. Easy. And if you're going to meet someone and you know you're going to give them a business card, you could take 2 seconds and write a little note on the back and then hand to them. Now it feels really special. You can't do that on a digital business card. But if that's never you and you know plans on doing it, then you might be fine with these caveats.
Yeah. Now, and back to the first thing we talked about as far as dress appropriately. Two interesting little things that I'll throw out as just fun ideas. In my marketing playbook, I talk about business cards and that they are your brand. They are the first introduction that you make. And I make a number of recommendations about that. There were 2 instances that I came across in my career that were absolutely funny, and I have to pass them on because for the right person, they work really well.
Mm-hmm.
When I got my offer letter from Intel, it came from Hank O'Hara, who was the VP of sales at the time. And it was a nice letter, real typewriter typed out. And he had his business card underneath a paperclip. So I took the business card out, and for some reason I flipped it over. And his secretary had typed for him, "Good for one free drink with Hank O'Hara." That I thought was brilliant.
Wow.
Okay. And so I don't know how many drinks he gave out in his career, but that was his thing. That was a brand.
Oh, I love that.
Right. So you could show up at his office.
I might steal that.
And I was a nobody. And I could say, "I'm here to redeem my one free drink with Hank O'Hara." And I'm telling you, he would have to follow through on that. So just an idea. And it was fun. The other one, I was at a meeting. This is going back a number of years. And it was a conference room that was probably 8 or 10 of us were at this meeting. And so I was on the sales side, naturally. There were a couple of us, and the rest were the clients. And so my colleague got out his business cards, and he starts flipping these out to people. Now, he had taken the time to print out a full deck of playing cards on the back of his business cards. Okay? And so he said, "If you flip your cards over, I want to see if we can win a straight or inside flush or inside straight," right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it got to be fun. That very awkward, I'm passing out business cards, let's get down to it, get the PowerPoint going, all that kind of stuff. Now we're trying to figure out, did we get an inside straight? Right?
Oh man, now you're making me think.
It
on
was
the back
hilarious.
Of all my business cards, I should have a random number from like 1 to 20 to see like what'd you roll on your D20.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Now that takes some planning because you can't print up all of your cards the same. That means
Yeah.
the backs have to be different. So you're going to have to work with your printer. Hey, guess what? Digital printers can do all of this things now. That's the cool thing.
Yeah.
Back in the day when it was all offset prints to do all this work, much more difficult. You had to literally do that, by hand.
Yeah.
Now, piece of cake.
Oh man, that's giving me some really fun ideas that I could do for that.
Right.
For business cards through modular DM, but then for the Hard Knocks business cards we're
Right.
making out,
Yeah.
is on the back of them could just be a hard knock we really like.
Yes.
And we could just have a bunch of different ones.
Yes. Totally agree.
And you could be like, "Hey, turn around. What hard knock did you get?"
Yes.
When they have the business card from
It's
us,
a great idea.
and they turn over like, "Oh, that's really interesting one. Talk about a fun little conversation topic."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Works great when you're meeting people.
we should just do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the thing that.
By the way, these are things you can't do with the digital business card as easily.
That's right.
There's something special about it's something in your hands.
Oh yeah, and the look and feel and the thickness of the card, and those are all things that you can bring in a branding expert like us, and we could talk about that for a half hour and really get you set.
Oh yeah, it's a
But-
lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, because we
Oh,
met
yeah.
that one gentleman that owns the restaurant chain.
Oh,
remember?
yeah.
And his were gold plated. They were
Oh, yeah.
beautiful cards.
But
Oh my gosh.
they made sure that there was enough spot on the back for him to go write up something.
Yes, he did.
Because he
Right.
wrote up, "Hey, free meal on me."
Yeah.
And so, those are all the really cool things that, I could easily spend an entire 24 hours talking with someone to help them figure out a business card.
Yeah. Totally agree.
And it would be worth it because
Yeah.
they just have to get one more meeting.
Yeah. And I'll end on this, which I thought was really interesting. On that gentleman's business card, he had his executive assistant's name and email and her mobile phone number on there
Oh,
as well.
really? Okay,
So
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
that was really a very nice little jujitsu move. Like, hey, if you want to get a hold of me, you're probably going to be best to get a hold of, I can't remember,
I know
Tamara or
Janine
whatever her
or
name is, whatever,
something,
right?
yeah.
And I thought that was a really nice way of also projecting himself that he has an EA,
Yeah.
right? So all of those things, brand, all in this little 2.5 by 3-inch card, I think goes a long way to setting the stage for a really positive brand.
Yeah. Well, hey everyone, it has been really great sharing all these hard knocks with you. We've run through just about everything. Well, not everything, but about 5 real good things for you to keep in mind when you're meeting new people, you're networking, you're selling, literally anything to do with just talking with people, with other human beings. Is remember, first and foremost, you have to be curious about who they are and what they're doing. If you're not, you're sunk already. None of the tips we ever give anywhere in Hard Knocks will ever work. You have to have that curiosity to learn about someone. But just as a quick little refresher, if you do have that curiosity, it's all about first starting by asking about where does someone get their energy from. Really dig down deep and to find out who are they as a person, because it's probably not always the work they do. And if it is, they'll probably tell you about that really cool project you never would have learned about otherwise. Then make sure to think about, well, how are you dressing? How does it really set apart me as a brand? What's the brand I really want to have? But at the same time, how am I going to make this person feel very comfortable? That I'm not extremely outdressing them. That if they're a farmer, I want to make sure that I'm dressing to show, hey, I get you. I want someone to understand and feel like you are just like me. You can use props to introduce yourself. You're trying to really break the ice. And when you meet someone after you've started to get to know them and they've known you, make sure to always ask those questions like, who is someone that I currently don't know that I really ought to? Which you'll only be able to ask if you know and they know the type of person you are. Otherwise, they'll never be able to answer that question very well because they don't know who you are. They just know, okay, he's a marketer. I guess another marketer, which is not nearly as valuable as saying, oh, yeah, I want to introduce you to maybe someone who's in the realm of marketing or design or sales or something like that, but they love D&D or they love telling stories or they just finished reading all the Sherlock Holmes books. I think you'd love talking with this person. And then lastly, if you're thinking about getting a digital business card, I don't want to say don't do it, but I do want you to say beware. There are a couple different things you might want to consider. Maybe you want to take that extra time to go and make something absolutely incredible that is a physical business card because a lot of people are moving over to digital and you might end up being that one person in the group that has something truly fun and interesting about your card that's just an entire experience. But until next time, everyone, stay curious. See ya.